Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining LinkedIn Live for our first ever Women Elevate episode. And I have with me joining Ana Pinczuk, and we'll get into a little bit of her background. So, my name is Sarah Katz, and I am a partner and co founder at Spaulding Ridge. And the first time that I actually met Ana was walking into the Anaplan office and remembering that you had that one stripe
Pink, right.
pink streak, and I'm like, oh my god, she's amazing. I want to get to know her, and you know, and so I would love for you to give a little bit of background. But before we start, just in case everyone wasn't sure or haven't heard of Women Elevate, it's a program that we set up at Spaulding Ridge to really work to cultivate a space for women that are rising leaders in the workforce. And so we're working with our channel partners, our clients, and also internally. And we call it the We at Spaulding Ridge. So let's get started. All right, Ana.
Yeah,
Give,
thanks. So first of all, I love that. And I didn't catch that, Sarah. So, um, thanks for inviting me here. Should I introduce myself a little bit? And we'll start with that. So first of all, yeah, perfect. So I'm really excited to be here. As Sarah said, I'm the Chief Development Officer at Anaplan. And just to provide a little context, what that means, I run basically product engineering, our customer care organization, and IT. I'm also a mom of two boys. They would kill me if they heard this. They're 23 and 20, and I have had a long career that's included running, being a GM of several businesses and really spending time in engineering and sales in market development and all different areas as well. So that gives you a little bit of a profile. I'm an engineer by heart, so that's my background, and then went to get an MBA and different training on the way. That's a little about me.
well, again, Ana, Chief Development Officer, it is a lot of different responsibility, but it makes a lot of sense since you've done so many different roles to bring that all together. And I wanted to take your experience and also your different things that you've, from life to work to being an executive. Women Elevate, I guess, what does that mean to you? And then how is Anaplan right now really elevating their women and helping other women in the organization just rise up?
Yeah, no, Women Elevate to me, I think we all, no matter whether, what gender we are, we all have a responsibility, I think, to create the next generation, right, of women in particular in this case. And so for me, Women Elevate is really the opportunity to create this space, right, to allow women to grow in their career. By the way, that can be laterally, it can be, promotions, it can be, just growing on a personal side as well. So it's really about creating that space for women to position them for, really greatness. So that's what it means for me. And at Anaplan, just to give you some, perspective, as with any company, I feel that we have that responsibility both for ourselves and our people internal to the company, but also, with our partners, right? With everybody that we work with. For us, our culture is super important, and ensuring that we focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And that we provide that space for women to grow and learn and develop. That's important, especially as a senior leader. I feel that's a pay it forward responsibility. Part of that at Anaplan starts with showcasing our women. We've got 3 women on our board, which is great, including an African American woman. So I feel like that sets the tone a little bit for, diversity and the position of women in leadership. We've got, I think it's 4 or 5 women that are in senior positions, the chief strategy officer, we've got the head of finance, our chief people officer, and then women in different parts of the organization. So part of what we do at Anaplan is we've got to walk the talk, right? And then the second piece is to provide the the capabilities and the offerings and the opportunities, right, to enable the women at Anaplan and in our partner organizations to grow. And by the way, I talk about the 3 E's a lot internally with our women. We talk about experience, exposure, and education. So there's different mechanisms that we can actually enable our women to grow and to be elevated.
And I think that's so important. I know during some of the conferences or the gatherings, Women in Network is a big area just to get everybody together so that we can bring others into the community as well. And really definitely appreciate that. I think so. We just got a question, and this is live, so it's all dynamic.
Good.
So one of the questions was, what are some of your mentors? I know you're on a few boards. You mentioned that you have women on your board at Anaplan as well. Do you have like top 2 that you default to or go to?
Yes, I do. I mean, and I'll it's interesting with mentors and actually sponsors as well. So one of my great mentors was a leader earlier in my career. Bill Gewertz is his name. And he's the one that kind of, I tell him, he sort of threw me to the wolves occasionally. He would look at what I could do and say, oh, you can do that. And he would coach me and position me, right? Help to coach me into these new opportunities. So I owe him a huge amount of gratitude. Then most recently, there's a couple of folks that I go to, a woman and another male individual that are kind of my go-to people. And now it's more about bouncing ideas. Hey, I'm thinking about doing X, have you done that? How's that work? What are your thoughts on that? So I like to think that I have many mentors. My organization, I mean, just frankly, part of it is learning from the people inside the company who know things that I don't know, right? And I spend a lot of time doing skip levels and, going to the people that know and say, hey, how's that working? And like, show me, what should I know about this, right? So I think there's an opportunity to really learn from a lot of people that you get exposed to.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, I think in the organization, outside of the organization, having different perspectives so you don't default to group thinking or default to being comfortable. I think that's a great point. So we talked about your journey, and I know you have plenty of different experiences, but let's dig a little bit into some of the pointy questions that I know you and I were talking about. We're going to start slow, and then we're going to get into the more interesting stuff. So everyone, stay tuned. We're going to keep going. So the first thing is brand and reputation. I know when we were talking even earlier, a couple of weeks ago, there's just, you made a joke about, brand's a marketing thing, but it's actually more than that. Can you give a little bit more about why it's important to start from the beginning? And then on top of that, how do you influence others as you're,
developing your brand? Yeah. I mean, I'll give a little story, Sarah, of like earlier in my career, when I first joined, I joined AT&T from college, and I was a bit of a rebel in college, so when I joined the workforce and I was in the New York area, that, New York Black, I was, going out at night and doing my stuff, and I was doing, obviously working really hard, but I realized that some of my extracurriculars, which included, going out with my friends and, including, folks at work that knew sort of that, hey, she's like doing all this interesting stuff in New York. I realized like after a little while that, they know me as as a hard worker. She's doing a good job, but I was a bit of a partier earlier on in my life, right? And and then I got a lesson, right there and then about sort of perception being reality. And part of what happened was, we started to have conversations about, am I ready for promotion? This was my first promotion. And I could hear, from my manager that it was like, hey, you got to get a little bit more serious. You've got to like show that you can, lead other people. That was a big lesson for me because I realized that, there's a lot that I can do, right, in terms of my brand, but brand is really part of it is, you can shape it, but it's also how people view you, right? I learned that lesson again later on, like probably, when I was a vice president, and it dawned on me that in order to sort of, get positioned for broader roles, maybe start to consider boards, that I had to actively work on my brand, which, as an engineer, honestly, it was like, it didn't feel that comfortable to me. And so, the initial work was really about trying to understand how people perceive me, and, doing some work there. And then also putting together almost like a brand statement. Like if I had to, the elevator pitch, if I had to tell somebody who I was, how would I describe myself? And that was really the first time that I actively started to think about the brand, and how to position myself, but in this authentic way, so that I could describe myself and feel comfortable with it. And I also learned with that, Sarah, that if you describe yourself and you think your brand is not authentic, people kind of see through that, right? So if I say I'm, whatever, Michelle Obama or something, and people
Right.
go, oh, they're like, these are all the things that are missing, that you're not like Michelle Obama, right? So I think thinking about your brand statement, in my case, it's about being a transformational leader. That's what when I thought about sort of what's the essence of what I love to do and how do I describe myself, that's what I tend to say to folks. I like to transform businesses. And once I settled on that, and it was authentic, and then the question is, what do you do? What do you do to match your brand? If you're not quite there, then it's about action, taking action that really matches, and speaks to that brand.
Yeah, and I think the brand statement that I hope everyone listening takes that away because it's so important is to be able to say who you are, but truly believe it and be authentic about it. And then I think the other thing that you mentioned is the evolving. As you evolved, it's not that your full brand you pivoted, but like you still understood that what I did to get there isn't the same to do the next thing.
Right.
And it's not even just the latter, it's just more evolving as a human being and as a woman and understanding yourself of what you want to actually do. And I think that's super important because we change, like it's natural.
That's right. And absolutely right. And if I had been 4 years into my career and I would describe myself as a transformational leader, that probably wouldn't make much sense, And so I think there's a time and place for who you are, and because we're growing as individuals, and I even think about this now, in a broader role. Well, how would my brand change? One of the big things that I've been thinking about is really around incorporating into the brand the pay it forward, the giving back element, because I'm doing more. I feel like I'm doing more of that, right? And transformational leader doesn't always represent that. So I think there's an opportunity at every stage that you're in to start to be introspective, about how you describe yourself, and frankly, who you want to be, and how you want to contribute to.
I love that. Yeah, I had I don't know, this is a year or two ago, somebody mentioned to me, and I actually presented it at our company meeting as well. There's a concept of learn, earn, and return. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've heard that before, but it
Yeah.
feels very aligned with that concept.
Very
It,
much so, right? And I think if you put brand ahead of that, and then you say kind of learn, earn, and return, then it almost becomes like a full circle. It goes in full circle, right? I could say, well, this is my brand for today. This is sort of what I learn, earn, and then once I return and give back also, that sort of amplifies who you are too, right? And now your brand is actually broader than when you started a little bit, right? So um, I do view it as a journey, to your point. And for each individual, depending on where you are in your career, um, I think it's good to define it and to have, an awareness of how you want to be perceived and how you are perceived, right?
yeah, no, I love that. And now we're going to jump into probably a little bit more um, dynamic question, I would say. And that's really, I've talked to a lot of different women, and I've also thought about this as myself personally. Can you do it all? And what does that mean exactly? And can you be a mom, an executive, and a good partner? And I know a lot, and if so, or some version of it, what is the secret?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because I think it puts a lot of pressure on women. When you start to say to somebody, "You can do it all," boy, that's a hard one. And the last thing we want also is for women to compare themselves to other women and just say, that's like a killer when you say, "Oh my God, look at all the things she does, and I can't compare myself." So I think I think the way that I think about it is more, are there a set of things that we want to do as individuals? And can we position ourselves to do those things? And it might not be all in somebody else's, point of view, right? But it's all to us. And I'll give you a little story. As I said, I have two sons, um, and I was going to school. I found out I was pregnant at the same time that I got accepted to the technology management program at Wharton. So, and at the beginning of that, I put this little sticker on my computer, and it said family, then work, and then school, because I was doing all three at the time. And it was sort of like this reminder for myself that maybe I just can't, I'm not sure I can do it all, but if I can't, at least I know what the order of priorities is. And while we all like to say family comes first, believe me, there's been a few times where I actually had to catch myself and say, okay, right, am I really doing the things that are supporting my family first? So I think from my perspective, it's important to understand what you can do. And I'll give you an example of where, I had to make difficult choices. Around that time, my mom got cancer, and she's doing fine, okay, now. But um, when that happened, I looked at the family, work, and school, and it was hard to quit school because that was but I did take a 4-month leave from work
Mhm.
to take care of my baby and my mom. And I thought, okay, I'll come back to work and then I'll finish school, right? Um, Lesson learned for me is, by the way, it was okay to do that. It's okay to give ourselves permission to make these choices that are important. It's not the end of the world, and our careers and our lives continue, right? So I think it's really about defining what is good for you in your space, and not beating yourself up too much, making trade-offs, knowing that there's a time and place, and things
Yep.
will be okay.
Perfection is something that is not attainable. And that's been, I know for a lot of my friends and a lot of people that I know is, it's hard to realize, but when you do, you almost have this moment of like, okay.
Yeah, and I've been telling people, yeah, exactly, right. And I've been telling, I'm a Peloton user, and they talk about progress, not perfection, right? And I really love that saying, because it's really about moving forward, especially for women, elevating women. You're going to hit some snags, you're going to zigzag in your career, in your life, but it's really about progress. It's about recovery, right? Oh, that stuff happened. Oh crap. How do I move forward, right? It's not about perfection. Nobody is perfect. And it's much more honest, right? To say, hey, it's a journey. Let's make sure that we continue to grow, we continue to achieve, but we'll have our setbacks as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think like your post-it note or something that is just like right there, a reminder, letting you know of like the priorities. And I do think, unfortunately, when something bad or very impactful, or you know, my father passed away, and I remember going to Jay actually a while back and asked, he got sick, and I asked, we traveled right
Yeah, that's
before
right.
everything happened. In consulting, you travel, and I remember he's like, do whatever you need to do for your family. And I stayed local for a full year and a half, and just was there. And I can't say enough how much I, one, appreciated that support, but also knowing that that's where I needed to be. Doesn't matter what work or anything, but you know,
Exactly.
everybody figures out what's best for them, like you said.
That's right. That's right. And in the end, that's the thing, when people talk about work and life integration, and whatever people say about it, I think for all of us, we're all going to have, my father had a cardiac arrest. So I very much understand, you suddenly have to go and you have to be with your family. And I think the nice thing is we work in environments, and I think there's been enough progress now that for men and women, these are much more acceptable things to go do,
Yeah.
and to be able to prioritize family. Um,
It's being in a good environment culturally too. So that's how you assess. And I think with I think I like the fact that you're like, it's not perfection, it's a reminder, and then continuing to learn of how what makes sense for you. So I think that's a really good takeaway. Um, but going into a little bit, hopefully on the lighter version of confidence. And I can't tell you enough, Anna, and I'm sure you've had many conversations about how to build up your confidence. And like one of the questions I also talk about is like, do you believe in fake it till you make it? What does that mean? What, like, how do you build up that confidence? I would love to know from you, because you exude confidence the minute I met you, in the most positive, humble way.
yeah, first of all, thank you so much. And likewise, and from my perspective, part of confidence, it's similar to athletics in a sense, right? Where you get confidence in athletics because maybe you start out and you're not very good, but then you're able to practice, right? You do certain things and you gain courage, right? And people give you tips, and then you practice and you get better. So to me, confidence is really about practice. Starting with practice, putting yourself in a position where you're willing to take some risks, putting yourself in a position where other people can give you feedback, and then feeling like you then can do it, and then you do that kind of all over again with a different skill, a different area, right? um, Fake it till you make it is a little bit part of that, right? I mean, there's an element of putting yourself out there. That's the way I put it. When I hear that, I say, okay, what people are doing is, geez, they're feeling uncomfortable. They feel like, people talk about imposter syndrome and things like that, right? But I think what that is just having a bit of the personal courage, to put yourself in a position to do something that you haven't done before. And after a while, I think what happens, and you exude the confidence, you've been in a position of leadership, then, it's okay to be confident about the things that you're good at, but it's also okay to not know. Confidence is also the ability to say, you know what, I have no idea what you're talking about. Can you share that with me? And so I can learn. And people appreciate that too, right? Because everybody's on their journey of learning. And by the way, I still have moments, I've had moments where, I didn't feel like I was as confident as as other people thought I was, but what happens over time is that, you get comfortable with the uncomfortable a little bit. You get comfortable with asking, with learning in front of other people, with making mistakes in front of other people, with having a sense of humor about it. Like, oh my God, I just goofed. Well, let's keep going, and there's an authenticity to that people appreciate, and they see themselves in it too, right? So confidence is really being able to eventually be yourself.
Yeah, and this is actually, imposter syndrome is no joke. Definitely, I agree with that.
Yes.
Getting out of our own way. It's interesting how, like, a couple of things you said, but really what getting out of our own way is being able to identify the fear or what that fear is and being okay and aware with it. And so I think as I also progressed or just learned from other leaders, I realized everyone doesn't know something. And
Exactly.
they just are aware enough to say, I will figure it out, or I know somebody that can figure it out with me. And knowing that and just getting out there and practicing, it is one of those things that just gets easier and easier over time. But just
I
doing that
agree.
first step.
I agree. And one of the things about women too, and I had a conversation recently with one of the women in our organization. There's cases where women won't put themselves up for a position. We all talk about this, right? Until they have, 95% of the qualifications, where, research shows that men don't need that. They don't have to have all the qualifications, because in their mind, they have this perspective, right, that I can learn the things that I don't know, or I can do it on the job, right? So I think this is one of the areas that I love to work with women on, is to help put them in a position, right? Grab some of the women in the organization and say, look, you're gonna be the one that's gonna give that talk, and they're like, what? But I think part of it is practice. It's building confidence by doing. It's having a safe space, right, where you can kind of maybe try something out, right, and get feedback among some friendlies, so that then you can learn those skills, and then eventually fake it till you make it. Go get the jobs that really are even more out there for you, right, and be able to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think having that ally or safe space or identifying people that you mentioned it in the beginning, like mentors or bound or just knowing that you can ask the question. But I do think that allyship and being able to find those people earlier and then often and then making sure you can identify the right ones. How do you do that, Anna? Like, how do you build allies across?
Yeah, I mean, I think
I guess, Mr.
yeah, you know, um, you know, I think it's really important for us as women to find those allies, and they can be women, they can be men in the organization, they can be people that are participate in things, with us. What I like to do is, is to engage, engage others in the interests that I have, and therefore, use those common interests or those common missions, to get those people to be an ally. And I find that that is helpful when I'm in, when I'm in meetings, when I'm trying to make a case for something, or I'm trying to ask for money, or whatever it might be, right? Part of it is to align with people that want to do something together with you, right? And maybe not climb that mountain by yourself, right? But get a few other people along that journey. And then those people can be spokespeople for the interests that you have. They can also reinforce you, especially in a meeting, where, I've been in places where I've sometimes I've been the only woman in the room, or, maybe I'm talking about something, that not everybody would be a proponent for, but having those allies there, right? Those individuals that I've talked to, they're part of the kind of a little bit of the inner circle. They understand what it is that I'm trying to do, and they're willing to support publicly, right, a given mission. That's the way that I've worked it. That's one way. I think a second way is really to be part of organizations, right, where you can build allyship. So, for example, I've been part of boards or organizations. I was part of the Anita Borg Institute for Women in Computing, right?
Mhm.
Initially, part of that was to build another group of women and men that had common interests. But over time, those folks are allies in a mission, to sort of do these broader things, and and they get to know you, and then they can help you with your cause. They can also help advocate with you, advocate for you, and then they can reference you too, right? So I think part of building allyship and then sponsorship is important, right? In a work environment. So you build allies, but you also build sponsors that are those people over time that are willing to stake their reputation on you, right? They're willing to say, geez, oh, you're looking for something. I know this great woman, Sarah. She's, I've seen her do that work. She and I are on this committee together, and I know Sarah can do it, right? And then you suddenly have not just an ally, but you have a sponsor, somebody that's like recommending you for the next thing, right? Which is important.
Yeah, and do you think with that question that was asked, do you think that's a way that men can be better allies? Is sponsorship, or what are some ways that you see like that men can help as well? Because I know
Yeah,
this question I get asked all the time as well.
yeah, it's interesting. In my last role, um, I was at HPE, and it was interesting because the leadership team, there were two women leaders, and the rest of the leaders were men. And with some of the men, we had some really great conversations about being allies, right? That these are not women's causes, or this is not just for a certain subgroup of people. What we're really trying to do in some of these cases is to elevate our best talent, right? Is to enable the best voices to be heard, right? Is to enable all kinds of people to showcase ideas. And so as a leadership team, we had a really great conversation about how we, not just the women in the team, but how we and some of the men on the team, right? How do we come together to advocate for some of these causes that initially started a little bit of, hey, how do we build a great place for women? But then it's really like, how do we all help elevate women? How do we, male and female leaders, do that? So I think look, not everybody is into this, at the beginning, because some of it is a passion. It's a bit of a passion play, but I've always been able to find men, that have been great allies, And one of my prior bosses, Rich Goldberg, who then when we were at Cisco, really got involved, was a great ally, really got engaged with the Anita Borg Institute. And so there's people like him, that I love to talk about because, they're such great role models for other men to be able to get engaged.
Yeah, and we're actually, interesting topic. The partners at Spaulding Ridge also asked, like, how could we be doing better? What do we need to get more educated on? Who do we need to invest time, etc. So I think you make a good point. It's one, the willingness and openness to know that, to learn, and then also to listen and then do and support. Because there's different ways you could do it. You could be investing in women's companies, right? You learn through that. You could be reading books. You can be asking, right? Asking directly the women that either work for you or you work with. I think these are all really good ways for men and women collectively to be thinking about how can we help one another. Um, I I could talk about this all day. You know this,
Yeah,
and
yeah, me too.
feedback is another one, and you mentioned it earlier, and I just wanted to, I don't want to skip over that because I know feedback is, even when we caught up, like, that was one that we concentrated on for a couple of minutes or more. Um, Perception versus reality. You said that was absolutely brand wise, but also getting and understanding that feedback. When is it, like, how do you get it? When do you take it? And then when is it too much?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and something that I've been wrestling with lately, even as part of my organization, right? Because I think feedback needs to be a constant. In some sense, we want to, as individuals, we want to be growing and learning and doing things better for sure, right? So in some sense, we want to get feedback, constantly. On the other hand, it can be overwhelming too, because, especially as a leader, one of the things we want to do is to be able to take feedback and then put plans, to actually take action on certain things, right? And you want to, and there's change management, or there's things, organizational things you need to take care of. So I think the balance, everybody has their own, my view is everybody has their own kind of limit as to what is too much. What I like to do is first tell folks that you don't want to like drink your own Kool-Aid, about yourself or the state of what you're doing, right? That because sometimes I know I do it, I think, oh, I'm doing all these great things, and suddenly somebody, throws a tomato at me. And it's like, oh crap, maybe it wasn't the best thing ever. So I think we need to have, pulse points, in what we do, both on an individual level. And maybe if we want to do it kindly, we go to those people that are kind of our individual board of directors. Sometimes we have like those close folks, they can be at work or family or others, that kind of tell it to us the way that, we might not want to hear it. So that's one thing. But second, what I try to do in the organization is I do a lot of skip levels. I use Slack for feedback too. People want to give me feedback. And we have like Poll EV or ways to have like at least, I do monthlies with the whole organization, for Q&A. And then we were doing, with COVID, we were doing weeklies with the whole management team. Now we've relaxed it a little bit. But part of this, especially when you're going through something like COVID, which is more organizational or environmental, part of it is getting touch points on feedback. How are we doing for everyone, right? And then on an individual basis, I think it's important for us to do, like I call it pings, but to ping other people, right? And just to say, hey, how did this land? Was that, did you feel that worked okay or whatever, right? And then there's very personal feedback, and I think that we have, we have to be cautious with that, right? Because there's a balance between giving feedback and hurting feelings, you know. So I always like to be for that kind of feedback. I think the setting, the timing, right? Thinking through, you know, to make sure that things land and can get absorbed by the person or by me if it's the other way around, right?
Yeah.
Um, and
Funny.
listening, by the way, you know.
Yeah. Funny. It,
Yeah.
listening is definitely key. Being open minded to hearing the perspectives, filtering through your own, like you mentioned, right? We all have a filter, and we all know of like who we take. Like we wanted to get it. One of the things that I learned is diverse feedback. So like it's balanced feedback, but it's like you hear from the people that might not agree with you in any level, but you
That's
get the
right.
understanding because they're your peers, or they might be other, um, and usually you get some nuggets that are interesting because you might have not thought of it that way. Does not mean you have to act on it. And I think the last piece was it, and it's really about when feedback becomes um, personal. And I think that when we put our job or our work, and I know that I'm guilty of it, and it becomes your identity at one point, and then anything and everything that somebody gives you, even though it's meant for positive intent or to help you grow, you take it personally. I think that's something that, I mean, everybody still works on it, but finally I'm looking at it as like, take yourself out of the situation, be a third party. I don't know if you've
That's
done
right.
this before. Take
Yes.
the information, but don't take it as though like they're attacking you, or you know, you're less of a human being. Actually just say, yes, okay, I hear what you're saying. I might agree, I might not agree, I might apply it, I might not, but understood. And I understand that that's something that I should just be aware of in the future.
Yeah. And I like that. You know, I like what you said. First of all, disconnect yourself a little bit, you know, from there's a message being given to you, right? There's also a how the message is being given. And I've found at times that both are important in
Mm.
how I receive a message, right? What I've learned over time a little bit is that I try to focus on the message and less on the how, and especially as women, I've noticed at times that sometimes how a message is delivered to me is different than how it could be delivered to a man, you know. So what I try to do is say, okay, um, you know, let's say I get asked a question and it's like sometimes it can be, I don't know, you know, it's not asked in the best way, or it's pointing fingers or things like that, right? What I try to do is take that out and respond to the intent, right?
Mm.
And try to take out the personal sting potentially from that, right? And just say, okay, that was maybe not the best way it was delivered, but here's what they're trying to say to me or ask me, and let me see if I can take that. And it takes a little, I think it takes a bunch of skill, and you know, you have to practice that because you know, obviously we're human, right? So the initial message can sting you, you know, sting me, right? But um, I think over time, what actually happens is people learn that you're willing to listen and to take the message. And I think if you stay at it, even with the people that give you, you know, weird feedback at times, I mean, there's sometimes when you go, I don't want to listen to that anymore. It's like, you know, it's too negative, or they're just not right. And I think there's always a bar, you know. But at the same time, there are those people that are in between that are like trying to give you feedback, but they're not very, you know, refined on how they do it. And I think those are people that we can work on also together to say, hey, I'm listening to you. You know, there's an opportunity to give feedback in return. You know, like it would help if you maybe don't make your feedback as personal, or as, you know, but I get your point, right? And I think I do need to work on that. And how can you help me, or what can we do together, right? So I think if you can make it that,
Yep.
then the other person feels like you heard them. They're vested in you and making you better.
There's so
Right.
much good stuff in that, just that topic alone, I know.
Yes.
And I definitely want to drill more. And, but we are getting to that time, and we have, so at Spaulding Ridge, we read a lot of books. And Jay Lobbs, our CEO, definitely kicked that off and educating himself and others as we do that. What are you reading right now, or that you would recommend for this group?
There's three. I kind of read several books at the same time because I kind of get bored with some topic and I go to the next. The three books I just finished Team Topologies. I don't know if you read that. Team Topologies is really about sort of new ways of thinking about teams, and this Conway's law is something that people talk about, that sometimes the way you organize a team or your structure of your organization defines the structure of your software or the structure if you put out there. Think about the cars of old. You remember, like, really long time ago, like in the 50s, you had a different key for the trunk than you had for the door of the car, right? And what people said was, that was because there was like the trunk team and the door team, and these people didn't talk to each other, and therefore you had two keys, right? Yep. So team topologies is a little bit about that, is about thinking about how we organize teams and to better deliver on an outcome, in this case in software. So that's been a fun book. I would recommend it. And I just started this book. This is completely not work related, but it's called Hooked. It's about, I don't know if you've heard about this, is Michael Moss, but it's more about the impact that the food industry has on the way we eat. And because in COVID, I've been sort of thinking about, oh my God, let's make sure I exercise and, I don't just sit here all day. I'm finding that kind of interesting as well.
Hooked.
So, yeah. Hooked.
Well, health, I mean, top of mind, right? And so we're
all
learning.
Health, exactly, health. I mean, the other one that I just finished that I read was How to Be an Anti-Racist. I don't know if you've read that from Ibram Kendi, and he's got I think a new book out. Mm-hmm. That was eye-opening as well, because I read something this week and that said, don't think about the privileges that you have. When they say you're privileged, it's not just so much about the privileges, but the fact that, in effect, there's a lot of people, right? It's the things that you don't have to worry about that, other people have to worry about, especially in our times. I think thinking about who we are and how do we really create the environment for women, but for really all people, to thrive. How to be an anti-racist in the impact of that in the workplace and in your personal life was sort of an interesting read.
Yeah, I'm in the process of reading that. Actually, a lot of people at our company are. Some have read it and some are in process. So definitely, that's a good one. 3 great books. I'm going to read all 3. I love in the year of reading. I know. A lot of us. So the last thing is, what does authenticity mean to you in 7 words or less?
Oh, in 7 words or less.
I'll give you 14.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Authenticity to me is being who I am, regardless of the environment in which I'm in, and so that's the first piece. The other words I would say is, it's interesting. The essence of who I am is always there. So if you look at me when I was 7 years old, or when I'm 50 years old, authenticity is those fundamental things about you. They're always there. They'll always say, Anna, I don't know, Anna is is this or that or the other, right? And your behaviors are consistent, right? That to me
Consistency is the hard
consistent,
part.
yeah, consistent behaviors of who you are, no matter what the environment, no matter what the progression, no matter what the title. You know, it's authenticity is who you are when you're with your family, you know, in
Mhm.
effect, with your friends and with work. And there's a base there. Obviously, you behave different with the level of trust that you might have with different people, but the base of who you are remains true and consistent.
Stay consistent with your base.
Yeah, exactly. Stay consistent with your base, you know, don't lose that which makes you um, what other people love about you,
Yeah,
right?
don't forget that. And then
Don't
what you
forget
love
that.
about yourself, right?
That's
Good.
right. Be proud of yourself, right? In that, you know, don't lose yourself. You know, we've all experienced that where people say, "Oh, you know, you suddenly got a new title, and you know, do you have big heirs?" Or you know, I don't know, you came into money. Do you have big heirs and all that? And I think the people that are authentic are the people that have that value set that is consistent, no matter what how the circumstances change for them.
I love that. Love thyself and love others
Yeah.
collectively. I want to thank you so much for joining me and being the first guest on Women Elevate We, and appreciate everyone that made it. This will be recorded and we'll keep the content going. Please follow us, and I promise to do this. I'm going to do this right at Spaulding Ridge on LinkedIn. And Anna, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a privilege.